Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. First thing we want you to do is hit the like button and the subscribe button and the bell button because the YouTube algorithm, not very friendly to certain creators. The more you guys like, the more you subscribe, the more you hit the notification bell, the more we will show up in your recommended feed.
And the more you comment. I know a lot of you can't help it. No, we love hearing your comments, even if it's the usual trolls. You guys help us out, honestly.
Yeah,
thank you.
Engagement matters.
It's nice. It's like we have our own little community of regular haters. So in our last video, we talked about those with progressive ideals who are hypocritical on the topic of veganism. And so today we have another one for you. David Pakman of the David Pakman Show.
Yes, just like Kyle Kulinski, David is someone who we really like. We really share a lot of similar beliefs. He is very reasonable, logical, level-headed, compassionate, except when it comes to veganism.
Something we see very often. This is a very, 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 very common thing. Animal cruelty is one of the injustices of our world that is not only still very acceptable, but actually people will argue in favor of it.
Yeah, David has been called on his show a number of times and asked about veganism a number of times, and it doesn't seem like he will ever decide to live a vegan lifestyle.
In our years of experience as vegan activists, advocates, debaters, both formal and street debates, the number one reason why most people won't go vegan is because they don't want to.
It's as simple as that, and recently David took yet another vegan call, and we wanted to watch it and respond.
Let's go first to Jay from New Jersey. Jay, welcome.
Hey, David.
How are you?
My question is,
Yes.
how do you justify eating meat, dairy, and eggs?
Who do I have to justify it to?
What about yourself? Let's just start with yourself.
It's interesting because I know David is like a little bit of a debate lord. Right off the bat, he's not accepting the premise that the caller is proposing. The caller is saying eating meat, dairy, and eggs requires a justification. David is saying, no, I don't think it requires one.
Well, when there's a victim involved, wouldn't you have to justify it to them?
So there, the caller is providing the clarification that eating meat, dairy, and eggs requires a victim. Mm-hmm. And so eating meat, dairy, and eggs requires a justification.
He's saying, wouldn't you have to justify it to them? I can see where this could go. I could see where this could go. If you're literally talking about justifying it to someone, David could pose, well, how do I justify it to an animal who doesn't have the ability to communicate with me in that way,
or understand the concept of justification?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that if you perceive that there are victims, every victim gets an explanation? I don't even know.
If you've perceived that there are victims, okay, here's where we start to go like, wait, hold on. What do you mean perceive?
It's not a perception that in order to eat a steak, you kill a cow. That cow is a victim. That's not a perception.
They do not have a choice in the matter. They don't have the right to defend themselves if they wanted to. They don't have a right to escape their situation if they wanted to. So yes, they are a victim.
And he says here, every victim gets an explanation. I mean, realistically, like, no, not every victim will receive an explanation, but it doesn't mean every victim shouldn't get an explanation. I think one of the most common lines in movies, like when someone is betrayed, the person will ask them, why? When you do something cruel, usually the question pops up, why are you doing this?
When you hurt someone's feelings.
Even people who go on trial, you're accused of murdering someone or stealing or whatever. Like,
what is the motive?
Why?
I don't even know what you're saying.
So that's intellectually dishonest. David does know what he's saying.
Well, yeah. So like if you or someone decides to eat meat, dairy, and eggs,
Yeah.
and if animals are dying for that decision
Yeah.
that's being made over and over again, do you feel like you could justify making that decision to that victim who has to suffer and die for it?
Like, for example, when I have my cappuccino, could I go to a cow and say, tell the cow why I'm drinking their milk, for example?
I knew that's where this was going to go.
Yeah.
I knew it because it's just, I mean, he's taking it literally. I think I know what the caller is trying to say. And of course, we cannot communicate with animals in that way. But what he's saying is, how do you justify your actions when there is a victim involved? When all you do is talk about your progressive ideals.
David, he's a self-proclaimed left-leaning channel. He doesn't try to be like centrist or fair and balanced. He comes out and says, no, I'm left-leaning, I'm liberal. It seems like he's just continuing to be intellectually dishonest by asking a caller, should I go up to a cow and ask the cow or explain to the cow why I'm drinking her milk? David knows that's not what the caller means, but he's avoiding the discussion, possibly because he knows he's in the wrong morally.
Like that cow who had to endure multiple pregnancies and then be separated from their child.
All
And of
facts.
course, if the child is a male, the males in the dairy industry almost always, well, they always get separated on the first day of life. And oftentimes they're killed on the first or second day of life. And this process will happen over and over again to the mother cows, like several times until they can no longer produce milk any longer. And then they'll ultimately get sent to the slaughterhouse. So yeah, like in scenario that you're painting, like with the cappuccino, do you think that there is a moral justification for consuming animal products if it's not a necessity, if we could just be using plant-based alternatives instead?
So like 2 minutes into the video, all the caller has done is like try to get him to answer the same question.
Yeah, and that's the short of it. I mean, he's used one example out of the many, many, many examples in the animal agriculture industry. And there it is. He asks, the question is, how can you justify? Not necessarily how do you justify it to the victim, but I think how do you justify it to yourself? How do you justify it to the millions of people who watch you?
David is a new father, if I do recall correctly. He has a baby. So when you have a baby, babies get vaccinations, for example. So babies go in and they get stabbed with a needle and it's painful and they cry and it hurts a lot and they don't know what's going on. You brought them to this building, you have this strange person start stabbing them with needles. Why are you doing this? There's an easy justification. It's because you want the baby to be protected, vaccinated against certain diseases. So it's for the baby's protection. David likes milk in his cappuccino. He's okay with forcibly impregnating a female, taking her children away from her, and taking the food that was designed for her children so that he can put it in his coffee.
Standard industry practice. That's just what needs to happen at the very basic level for milk to end up in your coffee.
Justification being, I would imagine he just likes the taste of milk in his coffee, but you see how the two justifications don't make sense. Like, I'm protecting this infant baby from future disease versus I like the flavor of something that is easily replicated by a plant-based alternative.
So the problem I have with this entire framing is that it's so absolutist and narrow, and it's not really like the way the world actually works. So for example,
I'm sorry, this is what we run into every time. These progressive thinkers, these progressive influencers, all of a sudden, veganism, but
Smooth brain.
because
Smooth brain takes.
this is an easily debunkable statement. It is the way the world works, actually, David. We've seen it. It is just what needs to happen for milk or any animal product to end up on your plate or in your cup. An animal needs to be exploited. That is the definition of the animal agriculture industry, is to exploit animals for their flesh, their secretions, whether that be dairy, milk, or eggs, for their organs, for their blood, for their fur, their skin, for their feathers, for the hundreds of things that we've decided to trivially take from them.
so for example, sometimes you follow these things to their logical conclusion. Like, I read a lot about this, and hopefully you'll indulge me for a moment. If we say, okay, eliminate all animal products whatsoever, great. So that now puts an incredible strain on a handful of crops, which now need to be grown in dramatically larger quantities in order to replace all of those animal products.
Well, see, that,
So,
wow.
He's actually proposing the thing that meat eaters propose to us in debates all the time, where they say, if the
Basic.
world went vegan overnight, what do you do with all these animals? He's flipping it and saying, if the world went vegan overnight, how are you going to grow enough crops to feed everybody? The world's not going to go vegan overnight.
Number one.
And you know that. And David specifically has a finance channel. He is so well studied and well articulated in the world of finance. Supply and demand. If you reduce demand, if fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people demand cow milk, and more and more and more people demand oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, hemp milk, rice milk, macadamia milk, cashew milk,
Endless
coconut
milks.
milk, the market will take away the cow milk and will supply the plant-based milk.
Gradually. It's an incremental process. As people transition to plant-based products, we will phase out animal products. So it's not like there's going to be this emergency situation overnight. Also, talk about monocropping here. Do you know what the animals eat?
Do you know why we grow so much corn and soy? It's not for vegans. It's for cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys and ducks and goats and sheep and all the animals that we exploit. We grow massive amounts of crops on land that we could free up to grow other things, but instead we monocrop to feed animals. It's not the people eating the corn. It's the animals. We grow all these crops, and then we feed the crop to the animal, and then we eat the animal.
That's 76 billion land animals every year that are slaughtered for food. 8 billion humans on the planet. 76 billion animals a year. 8 billion humans.
Which population would be easier to feed? 8 billion humans or 76 billion animals, some of which are like cows and pigs, and they're a lot bigger than us, and they eat a lot more than we do. So it takes a lot of food to feed a cow or a pig compared to a human.
Animal products. This creates absolutely massive monoculture farms, which are absolutely terrible for the environment. Many of these monocultures require absolutely bonkers amounts of water in order to generate equivalent amounts of, for example, protein.
We just did a video about how much water goes into animal products versus the tips that they give us here in California as how to save water.
Yeah, take shorter showers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're feeding millions and millions of cows. Pregnant cows drink more water, by the way, every single day, just so people can have a quarter pounder.
The water use also leads to many, many animals dying, everything from mice.
He's doing crop deaths though?
But drownings? Is he talking about drownings? What do you mean
I
water
guess-
use? Many animals
I mean-
dying. I'm not quite sure. Actually, he's not being very specific about
to,
that.
all
Yeah.
sorts of other things. And so we can do the entire thing that I gather is what you would consider to be morally right. And then we would still end up killing so many animals by virtue of how we restructure and reorganize what humans eat.
Who?
Are we really better off by killing different animals through drought and monoculture, etc.? I mean, I don't know.
Aren't we already killing animals through drought and monoculture right now?
This is the appeal to futility.
We will never live in a world where there's zero death.
So why try?
We might as well just cause death because you can't avoid it. That's why I personally, if someone cuts in front of me, I get out of my car and I shoot them. I murder them at a red light because I can't stop all murder. No matter what I do, there's always going to be murders. I can't stop all of humanity from murdering. So that's why I occasionally murder. I also sometimes if I'm a little short for cash, I rob banks because you're not going to stop all robberies. You just can't structure a society where all robberies will just cease. So I thieve a little bit.
I don't know. You tell me.
So
How do
I
you
would-
justify it to them?
I would be interested in response.
It's flipping the script. How do you justify crop deaths?
To the mice.
Shall we show the number of deaths per 1 million calories in 8 food groups
Yeah.
here
Actually, very provable fact is that less animals die.
in plant production. and in animal food production. So if you really do care about crop deaths, then
Plant-based is the way to go because facts, you know.
Responding to that counterpoint that you brought up, but you did kind of not answer the question I asked, David.
The answer to my question is I don't know what I would tell a cow. I've never spoken.
God, more intellectual dishonesty. He's asking you, how do you
He's
justify?
taking him literally. I mean, he's just trying to do this.
Purposefully, though.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
purposefully doing this.
Yeah. Because it's harder to answer the real question. I'm surprised, honestly, because he answers a lot of difficult
I know.
questions. Here's the thing, here's the difference, is that when you are the one causing the suffering, it's, again, like I said in the last video, it's really hard to look in the mirror, isn't it? It's really hard to admit responsibility, take responsibility for your actions.
Spoken to a cow. So I don't know, but what I'm telling you is it's the type of question that's really just a black hole. It doesn't really go anywhere in terms of answering the broader questions about how would we feed the planet on 5 monoculture crops that would have to be exploded, 1,000,000% in order to replace all the animal products.
1,000,000%.
Well,
Where
why?
are these numbers coming?
Yeah, why 5 crops? Anna and I only eat corn, soy, wheat, potatoes,
Bread.
and
Bread.
we only eat 5 crops.
Bread is a crop.
The crop of bread. I don't know where he's getting the 5 crop number and where he's getting the 1,000,000% number, but the caller is asking, why do you, David Pakman, a person in a position of privilege and who has access to these products, how do you justify causing needless suffering? And David Pakman goes, well, I don't know how the whole world is going to go vegan overnight.
I don't know how to talk to a cow. How do I tell a cow? I mean, you don't have to tell a cow. You just look into a cow's eyes and try to justify it to yourself. Like, that's what you do at vigils. So you look into the eyes of these animals and you can see the pain, the loneliness, the hopelessness. This is just having traveled who knows how many hundreds of miles cross country just to end up at the slaughterhouse. Just look into their eyes. You don't need to talk to them. And then try and ask yourself, how can I justify this behavior?
You're not answering that question to me, which is okay too.
Okay,
What
well,
I'm telling
I
you is
couldn't-
your framing is arbitrarily narrow and sort of myopic.
Well, I can respond to that counterpoint that you bring up.
Okay.
But I do want to say that, about the meat, dairy, and egg industry, like, it is like terribly, terribly cruel, the standard practices of meat, dairy, and eggs. So
Yeah, I'm with you right there.
that's-
I'm with you right there. The standard practices are horrible.
But
what I do is,
Okay, great.
I eat very little red meat, for example. And when I do, I try to know exactly what farm is it coming from, where I could drive and see what are the conditions.
Really?
Do you see how careful that language is? I eat very little red meat.
Little is not quantifiable either.
Yeah.
What's a little to you is not what's a little to me. Like, a little suffering is too much suffering.
When the only benefit you get out of it is taste pleasure.
I only hit my children a little bit.
Just a little, just when they get out of line,
Yeah. Just
you know?
give them a good smack.
You remind them who's boss.
But just a little bit.
A little bit though. And then he says, and when I do eat red meat, I try to know exactly what farm it's coming from.
What's
So there's-
try?
yeah.
Again, we have had a whole video about try. What is
He's
try?
like, I eat very little red meat, but when I do, I try. It's so like wishy-washy. He's not.
Every time you eat out,
If you eat a steak at a restaurant or a hamburger at a restaurant, it's factory farmed. If you buy steak or hamburger from a grocery store, it was factory farmed. Over 90% of all animal products on the shelves and in restaurants are factory farmed.
we're being conservative. It's more than 90%.
I think of 99.
Where I could drive and see what are the conditions. I think that, like, for example, I'm on pasture-free stuff where I know exactly where it's coming from. I'm doing certain things.
pasture free a thing?
Does he mean pasture raised?
I think he means pasture or free range or
Yeah.
something. Pasture free.
Pasture free is literally a factory farm. That's free of pasture.
I agree with you. The standard practices are terrible.
Yet I buy those products anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I disagree with the ethics of this industry. I participate anyway because I like the flavor.
You and I are on the same page.
No, we're not.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
Yeah, and then just to touch on like the resource intensive subject that you brought up.
Yeah.
So actually, when you really look into the amount of resources required that it takes to produce, like, raise livestock and breed these animals and then raise them to slaughter weight for meat and then also for dairy and eggs, when you look at how much water and crops and resources are needed for all these different kind of animal products,
Yes.
it is just like unbelievably intensive on the environment and
You're absolutely right.
weight
You're
and volume of
absolutely
these
right.
crops. Like if you've ever seen Cowspiracy, like they that's a documentary free on
Yeah,
Netflix.
I'm familiar with it.
Like, they
Cowspiracy,
go into
I
all that
saw
stuff.
it, and
So
Cowspiracy is fine, but it's
I
also
just want to
lacking a
respond.
lot of context and information. What you also have to consider is if we replace all of those products, what are they replaced with to meet certain caloric needs?
They will be replaced with the products that have the largest demand. Whatever people demand will be supplied. David Pakman knows this. The reason why we have a fast food restaurant on every corner of the United States is because people demand fast food.
People demand cheap, fast food.
He's like, if everyone goes vegan tonight, what are we going to do tomorrow? How do we supply? And to meet certain caloric needs, as far as I'm aware, all plant foods have calories. All whole plant foods have protein in them. All. I guess he's saying we take away all the animal products and we have to replace those animal products with specific plant foods. But the reality is that vegans eat a ton of different foods. There isn't like one specific or 5 specific plant foods that vegans eat.
It ends up being a very small number of things that can do it, which generates monocultures.
What? A very small number of plant foods can supply us with enough calories? What? I honestly don't understand this argument. We eat beans, rice, lentils, oats, legumes, leafy greens, fruits, vegetables. You can eat processed food, you can eat unprocessed food. There's like tens of thousands of edible plants on the planet.
Potatoes. I love potatoes.
Cultures that's very bad for the environment in new and
all-
other ways.
it's-
Jay, I gotta run. I've given you almost 10 minutes. I know we're
I
not
just
gonna
one more-
agree,
one more for
okay?
you. Just one more. I just want to say, like, okay, about the amount of crops, like it's always less crops to eat a plant-based diet. That's first of all. So if you want to talk about crop deaths, there'll always be less crop-related deaths on a plant-based diet. But you still haven't answered the question: is how do you justify eating meat, dairy, and eggs when there is a victim involved? And you said that
I'd
you
have
don't-
to
you have
think
never
about how I
spoken
talk to
a
the
cow.
cow, Jay. I told you, I think that those.
Wow.
So dishonest. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, you know, it could have been a really good debate had David tried to answer the question with some sincerity, rather than be like, I don't want to face the consequences of my actions.
He calls out right-wingers on his show all the time
time.
for this exact tactic.
Yeah,
Question dodging.
very common when it comes to
A lot of whataboutism, crop deaths though. What if everyone went vegan overnight though?
I would have believed him more had he just said, you know what, I just want to eat cows.
Yeah.
I just want to drink milk because I like it.
Yeah.
That would make more sense than what he's doing right now, because it doesn't follow his usual style.
His very like reasoned and level-headed approach. Just say like, I like cow milk in my coffee and I don't care that baby cows die for it. I like to eat a little bit of red meat here and then, and I don't really care about the carbon emissions and I don't care about the life of the animal. I like red meat every once in a while.
But why doesn't someone like David Pakman use that argument? Because it would sound bad. No one wants to feel like they're a bad person. I don't think David Pakman is a bad person. I don't think anyone is really a bad person. People make bad decisions.
Those
Well, talk
questions
to
are
me because I want
philosophical.
to talk on the
black
cow's behalf. The cows are dying for their
All right, then.
decision to put the
Jay,
milk in your
I've
coffee.
given you
so I
more
just
time
want
than
to
I
know.
give anybody. I gotta let
How
you
do
go,
you-
okay?
All right, well, think about it, David.
All
Thanks
right,
for
I'll think
taking my.
about that. Thank you. Boy, see, this is why I when I saw the user was Jay Vegan, I almost got away from it.
Why?
But
What are you afraid of?
Again, the reason is because vegans have a really good point and non-vegan progressives and liberals don't like that
Yeah, they have a really hard time.
because they like pepperoni pizza and cheeseburgers.
Yeah, it's a hard admission to make.
When you advocate for freedom and not harming others, we just did a video about Kyle Kalinske where Kyle considers dogs in the other category, worthy of protection. Maybe David Pakman doesn't consider any non-humans worthy of protection, but if David Pakman cares about cats and dogs, for example,
Then we have a debate.
then you have to justify why pigs and cows and chickens also don't get that same treatment.
I do regret that. I do regret that. As many of you know, I'm a busy
He regrets taking the call, I guess.
How much of a better video would it have been? There was really no substance to it. It was really just David deflecting the question. How am I supposed to talk to a cow? I don't know.
It would be the same as if someone was abusing infants.
A toddler who can't speak for themselves, who doesn't yet know how to speak.
Yeah. And they're abusing them. And you say, how do you justify this? And you go, I can't talk to the baby. The baby doesn't speak English yet. How am I supposed to communicate with this baby?
Nah,
It's that dishonest.
If anything, wouldn't you argue that someone, whether an animal or a toddler, who is unable to speak words, I mean, a baby is able to cry just like an animal, but for some reason, animals don't count, but both are able to express pain verbally and physically. They turn away from it, they want to run away from it, they want to avoid it. That is what living beings do. Babies will do the same thing. Would you use that argument when it comes to babies? Would that argument then shift to, oh, well, babies are human? Then that becomes a different debate.
You could do the same thing for dogs. I think it's pretty clear when dogs are hurt, they tend to make
Noise.
and sound, and they, it's pretty apparent when dogs are happy versus sad versus in pain versus excited. And they don't even speak English.
Where do you draw the line? This would have been a way more interesting video had he taken the question a little more seriously. He titled it, Vegan Caller Confronts Me, Wants Me to Talk to a Cow.
It's
Really?
Yeah, it seems like being intellectually dishonest and dodging questions and coming up with straw man arguments like vegan caller wants me to talk to a cow, which is not what the vegan caller wanted you to do. It comes across as, David likes to say, pathetic.
Well, guys, what did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe to this video. Thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon and also all of your Etsy purchases. And please check out the shirts, which are running out. Until next time.